Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best Picture Must Be Doing Something Right podcast. I'm here with Jamie.
Hello.
And we're back on regular schedule, the normal type of episodes that you'd expect from the podcast after a quick break from doing these kind of reviews, so we could talk about the Oscars for a bit. We're on more platforms now, which should help find us easier. And we've been getting great support on the podcast recently in terms of numbers we've been getting, get some new audiences in, which is great and helps us out massively. The next aim is to get onto the homepage on Apple Podcasts, or at least in the film and TV section, the film review section. I think will be nice. So if you want to help us out with that and you're enjoying the podcast, leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you're checking us out on there. But don't worry if not. So today's film is a relevant one, I think. It's something that a lot of people have been talking about recently because of its recent release in the UK on Friday and its recent Best Picture win at the Academy Awards last week. That is Chloe Zhao's Nomadland, which Chloe Zhao wrote and directed. The film is based on a non-fiction book called Nomadland, Surviving America in the 21st Century by Jessica Bruder. And the film stars Frances McDormand, David Strathairn, and a whole bunch of they're first-time actors, aren't they? Or like,
well, they're not really
actors.
They're people who were interviewed for the book.
Yeah,
a lot of the cast are actual people from the book, so I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, what you'll see when you see the cast list is everyone's got their same name with the characters they played, apart from Frances McDormand as Fern, who sort of had to it was sort of method. I was looking into this. Her performances was one where she, lived in a van and she went around the country and went through the whole feeling of being a nomad. And they actually believed a lot of the people that she talked to during the film actually believed she was a real actress. There was a pivotal scene which I'll talk about in the spoiler section where that became apparent. If you don't know what the film's about, the plot synopsis is a woman in her 60s who, after losing everything in the Great Recession, embarks upon a journey through the American West, living as a van-dwelling modern-day nomad. And what's interesting about this is the idea of being a nomad, I hadn't heard of before. And I think it's quite foreign to people in this
country. You haven't heard of a nomad before? Have you heard of a historical nomad?
No, I hadn't. I guess the point of comparison in this country, but it's done in a lot, always portrayed in a less attractive way, and usually quite a demonized part of the community is a travelers community. And
I know it. Yeah,
that's the point of comparison here. So that's why it's strange to see a film like this, especially in the time we're in at the moment, as an American film. Portraying these kind of characters, especially and particularly in a way that I wouldn't have necessarily expected them to be portrayed, I guess.
Well, Chloe Zhao has this philosophy that's comes through very clearly in the film. That there's good in everyone, everyone is fundamentally a decent person, and you can really see that. I mean, that's at the core of this film. It's in that genre of traveling around, talking to people and learning their life stories.
Yeah.
So you can really compare this to to Extremely Loud and a completely different class of film.
Let's not take the mick.
But what I mean is, it's that genre. It's that.
Yeah, of course.
This is that genre done correctly, traveling around and talking to people.
Well, the central theme of the film and sort of the tagline for it is it's not about the destination; it's about the journey and who you meet along the way. There's this central tagline which is a specific point of reference during the film. Is this idea of it's great timing? I completely forgotten what it was. See you down the road. That's it.
Yeah.
Where you might meet someone at one point and then you'll see them at a later point, and they can have a greater impact on your life that way.
Because the guru, what's his name? Bob Wells, actual traveling guru in real life as well. That's his philosophy. There is no final goodbye. There is just see you down the road, because a lot of the times he actually does.
Yeah.
So that philosophy really does apply to his lifestyle. And it's interesting, this thing about it's based on a non-fiction book and these are the real people.
Yeah.
Because they have, it's not a dramatized version, not exactly. It's very lightly dramatized. It's like a lot of what they talk about, I believe, is based on real things that happened to them.
Yeah.
And
that's sort of like the emotional sense of the film, isn't it?
yeah, it's more. It really is just. It's a film about the people, and Frances McDormand is just our window into this life, and it's fascinating that she's one of the few like proper veteran actors in the film. Another one is David Strathairn. I think I'm saying his name right. He's been in Lincoln and the Bourne films. He's been in all sorts. And
wasn't he? I believe he was Oscar nominated for Good Night and Good Luck, which is a brilliant performance in a film that is very mediocre. But
I was thinking it's interesting that he's also playing a character named after him, even though he is, of course, an actual actor. And I think
I do want to talk about him and his their essential relationship with Fern and Dave, the character played by David Strathairn. But we can't yet. So
I think the trick to it is that it's just these little things just to make the film more authentic. Because I've seen a lot of people in comments and the forums, they're all saying, "Oh, it's like a docudrama, like it's like a reenactment." I see where they're coming from, but
I don't.
I'm really painting the image for the people who haven't seen the film.
Yeah,
it's it's very grounded, and there's nothing over the top or sensational that happens, because that would be disrespectful to these actual people's lives if you put in like a massive cinematic plot line. Although we can, I guess we have a bit to talk about in the spoiler section. But that's just my little painting the image of what the film's trying to be.
What I'd say is something that we talked about quite a lot on the show so far is this idea of narrative structure. And there's a scene like halfway through the film where you see Frances McDormand floating down a river, and I feel like that's a good summary for what the film is narrative-wise. It's sort of like a flow down the river where it's sort of like things are happening, things are moving on, but it doesn't necessarily conform to normal ways that we perceive cinema, or it doesn't have to be, pivotal moments or life-changing things happening all the time. Because realistically, what you're finding is this film taking place after all the action of Fern's life has taken place.
The lost, yeah.
Yeah. So you're told immediately about how she's had to move out of her home. The city was evacuated that she lived in. She's lost her husband, so she's a widow, and you find her just living out of a van. And basically, so all the drama of her life, if you were to make a biopic of this character of Fern, you wouldn't show any of this. It's sort of like this is what would normally be the end of the journey. So I think what the film is doing, it's exploring what happens next in people's lives, because it doesn't just suddenly end when it could easily be when you're portraying a widow, someone just sitting in an empty house on their own, wasting away. This is an antidote to that. We're saying we're following this woman's life. She's in her 60s. She's moving on, and she's not giving up on life. She's creating a new life for herself, which I think is a very positive way of looking at things, and I think are very much an antidote to this perception in Hollywood that people don't want to be watching films about women in their 60s.
Oh, absolutely, because the way that kind of character is codified in films is exactly as you described it, just sitting lonely in a house, maybe
on the end of the telephone while someone else is doing something more exciting.
Yeah, just giving advice to the main character. That sort of like narrative tool rather than an actual character.
Yeah, sort of like Molly Shannon's character in Promising Young Woman, to use an example.
Yeah, a very good example. But that is something very fascinating about it. It's one of the very few things that's fascinating. Sorry, one of the many things that's fascinating about this film that come together, that it creates more of an experience than like a traditional cinematic film. I will admit, Uh, although it's one of the things you're not supposed to admit, it was starting to lose me a bit towards the end.
That's fair.
It's not a long film by any like it's not boring, but I was like, oh, I kind of get I get what it's saying. I get that there's going to be no third act or no big finale,
Hmm.
so I feel like it could end the tape at any point. I
Yeah, I
think
think that's fair.
we've seen enough. I've I've seen like enough to get this character. Like I've enjoyed the experience, but now it can like it could
Yeah.
wrap it up at any time.
Yeah, I feel like that's fair. But then on the other hand, what I think always turns me towards a specific film and why specific film would stick with me is its ability to for you to sit in with it. You
Yeah,
spend time with the film rather than making you feel a specific way. It's about spending time with a film. Like my favorite film of all time is Richard Linklater's Boyhood. And I feel like there's a very similar kind of response that you have. And that was a film at the time, which I think that Nomadland has been facing in a similar extent, where people say, "Oh, this film's boring. I don't get it. Nothing really happens." But it's sort of the point. You're supposed to sit with it and you're supposed to be like absorb yourself into this world. You're believing in this world that you're seeing, and I feel like there's a good comparison between the two. While I feel like where Boyhood ends, it ends at the point where okay, we go off.
his
You
life's just
leave him. You
beginning.
leave him to live his life at that
Yeah,
point. While this film is sort of like beginning at a new life beginning after someone's led a previous life in the past that we don't know
yeah.
about.
Well,
And
it's sort of like she's debating whether or not throughout the film to move on properly. Well,
yeah,
she's not debating. She's made up her mind that she's happy what she's doing. But it
yeah,
seems like every other character is like trying to push her into their ideal version of what the next chapter of
yeah.
her life should be.
There's that scene at the beginning of the film where she's in the shop and there's that woman and the young girl that she used to tutor for, and she's sort of like persistent about, oh, where are you living now? You can come and live with us at any time. You know,
It's
you're clearly in a bad
fascinating.
place because it's this perception of homelessness is the thing where people don't really have an understanding of what people perceive as home. Um, Frances McDormand. Sorry, Fern doesn't. Fern is Frances McDormand's character. She doesn't perceive herself as homeless in the film. She feels like
Houseless.
yeah, just houseless. I'm living in a van. I go around. Go and make my way between jobs all the time,
That
and
being said, Chloe
that's
Zhao
fine. Yeah,
doesn't want to give the Hollywood impression that this is somewhat of a glamorous or noble lifestyle.
no,
It is portrayed as being very difficult,
yeah,
but there's a certain atmosphere to it. There's the idea that these characters are just happy to get on with their life. They're not saying this is a glamorous way of living, but it's what either they
mm,
don't have a choice or they don't like the choices they do have, or they have
mm,
chosen to live like this. They've chosen to go on the road and see the world before being having
yeah,
to be cooped up in a hospital or retirement home or whatever. This
yeah.
is
That's the thing. Yeah,
so it's not that it's glamorous, it's just that everyone else's perception of what she's doing, they just don't understand. They think she's just maybe she's refusing to move on, but that's all that they can focus on. All the
hmm.
people in her life are only focused on, oh, you haven't moved on yet. You stayed in what's the town called?
I can't remember. I can
The,
check for you though.
you stayed in the town that got
Empire,
closed.
Nevada.
Empire, that's it. You stayed in that town that got closed down. Now you're just living out on the road. You're not moving on. But from her perspective, Fern, she's just happy to she's just getting on with it.
Yeah.
She's living. She's going from job to job. I mean, I'm sure she'd prefer to have like an actual like full time permanent job.
Mm.
But she is that the word is like content.
Yeah. And I feel like that comes a lot down to Frances McDormand's performance, which is a very subtle one, but you can see that she's in like a good place with how she acts. Like there's no like big scene or massive crying scenes and stuff like that. And doesn't go over the top about things. It's all controlled. And it's a performance that is absolutely unbelievably good.
Yeah,
Incredible.
absolutely. It's a very
It's
controlled
just controlled,
performance.
yeah. And that takes greater skill to me than your big bombastic loud performances. It's about
Absolutely.
how much control you have over the scenes you're in, and she's in every scene as well. So she has to be controlling, and that's partly to do with how Chloe Zhao directs her as well. Like the direction in this film is absolutely incredible. Like, and it helps so much to have this general aesthetic that they have. Like the cinematography is so beautiful. There's a clear color palette to it. There's loads of brilliant shots of backgrounds and sunsets and things like that. It's very atmospheric, and that's what sells this sort of idea, because you've got to have something to make it as beautiful a film as it does, and it does it through its production style, even on a limited budget of only $5 million.
Despite being set only 8 years ago, it does sort of feel like a period piece. Like
You reckon?
it's capturing a moment just after the recession, or even during. Sorry,
Mm.
it's capturing the fallout of the recession that we're still suffering the effects from today. But
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot about this film that's relevant to today. But I definitely get the feeling of a snapshot when I was watching the film. And just in the technology as well, you can see that phones are only just starting to get as high tech as there would be throughout the 2010s. And as commonplace, because Dave, he still has like a flip phone.
Yeah.
Just little details like that which kind of grounds it. And then they were taking they had like a look inside a really modern, high tech, fancy RV,
Yeah.
which nowadays would probably be a little bit cheaper. I mean, I don't want to. You never
Yeah.
know. Actually, it might have got more expensive.
I don't
I
know.
don't know much about the RV scene, but it's just little things like that which kind of but it does it without dating the film, and I think it's still going
Yeah.
to be relevant for years to come.
I definitely think it's relevant for the year that we've just had, in terms of the way that we spend time with others, how important community is, and also the idea of home. A lot of people have spent the last year, well, pretty much everyone has spent the last year unable to go anywhere, just stuck at home all the time. And I feel like this film presents a sense of wanderlust where you can be, you know, on your own and okay. You can meet people along the way as you pass through life. And, it's not too late. It's never too late to sort of start living a different life if you want to.
Do you think that's the message it's trying to get across?
I think so, yeah. It's when there's life, there's hope sort of idea, isn't it?
What do you think the intention of the original book was? Do you think it was
Haven't read
purely
the
just
books.
journalistic? It was Jessica Bruder, a journalist who wrote it. Do you think that had a much more neutral approach?
No idea. Haven't read the book. Can't comment.
There are things in this film that I was surprised that Amazon had a very neutral portrayal.
Yeah.
They were just one of the temp companies that she happened to be working for. With all the recent news about it, when I first saw the big Amazon sign, I was like, "Oh, here we go."
Yeah. You're
He's
thinking
gonna.
potential product placement here, aren't you?
No, I was thinking opposite. I was
Oh,
thinking
really?
negative. I was thinking she was gonna just have a really horrible time there, and it
Yeah.
was going to be related to the news that we've been hearing over the past year, couple of years, whatever. But it
Yeah.
turned out to just be one of the stopping points in her journey. Very neutral portrayal of real life companies and
Yeah,
technology and
of
all that.
like 0 hour contracts and stuff and
Yeah,
temporary
exactly.
work and things like that. I think it does have something important to say about those things. That they are, a lot of these jobs are done by people that are, you know, not in it for the full time work. They're just doing it to get by, sort of thing.
I really that really struck a chord with me. I mean, I was talking. I work in retail, and I was talking to someone recently who's just been going from temp job to temp job, and a lot of that it was in factories.
Mm,
And he were telling me how he really didn't like factories, and that made him want him to jump to retail, even if it is all temp stuff at the moment.
yeah.
So stuff like that, even though the American work culture is different, I think that does travel across the seas.
Yeah, like the job center scene in towards the end of the film is sort of like I just want to work, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
and
I'm
the
happy to do
person's like,
whatever.
even though
Yeah,
she has all that experience, the person helping her is just like, oh, just we don't have anything for you, or she says something like, I just don't know what job I'd be able to get you,
yeah,
and it's just baffling. Like, what? Her CV
mm,
must be absolutely packed at this point.
yeah.
It's just ridiculous, but not. It's completely believable because that does happen every single day to people.
Shall we move on from the narrative side of things? We'll talk more about it in the spoilers section for those who have already seen the film. I do recommend watching the film before checking the spoilers out, because it's definitely worth watching going in. It's sort of blind. I think I watched this film without watching the trailer first, which was hard because it took me ages to be able to watch the film. But I'm glad that I did. It's good to go in blind with this. Yeah, I just want to talk about its awards performance because something I
I
didn't
would.
really.
My
Yeah.
recommendation would be if you can see it in cinemas.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I know
Sorry,
that's an
yeah,
option
definitely.
soon.
Yeah, it's out in
Absolutely.
cinemas 17th of May.
I
Is
bet this looks really, really good on the
yeah.
big screen.
I was thinking that with some of the awards contenders I've seen this year, like the two that stand out for me for once, I think you should definitely see on the big screen are Nomadland and Minari. Minari is another one where I
Joshua
definitely
James
think
Richards did a fantastic job.
absolutely he was robbed of the Oscar by Mank.
I knew,
The
I
thing
knew
is,
it would happen. I knew it would happen. I should have
yeah,
tried to
yeah,
convince you
you
more.
did, to be fair. Like I saw a lot of people talking before the Oscars about how you'd rank the cinematography winners from the last 10 years or whatever. I'm seeing people put stuff like Life of Pi and The Revenant down at the bottom. This was partly the assumption that Nomadland would win. Like man goes straight down at the bottom there. If you're considering films like that as near the bottom, nah, you've got to have Mank right down the bottom.
Very
Um,
gimmicky.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, apart from that, its awards performance was absolutely exceptional. It won Best Picture, won Best Director, and Best Actress at the Academy Awards, three of the big five.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia page now, and it's just a lot of one,
It
one,
just swept the
one.
board.
Yeah, it's
It's
just
one of the
brilliant.
most remarkable awards campaigns I've ever seen. Like
Yeah, it's so
fair play
impressive.
in terms of especially if you consider that this is the longest award season there's ever been. And to keep that momentum up, front runner for about 6 months, nothing really came close at any point. Everyone was predicting it by the end. It swept away with its competition. As soon as it won something, it just couldn't stop winning. And it's one of those films like I saw it as but well before it won. I saw it before it won Best Picture, but while it was still the front runner. So you do get this idea of is this film going to be the best film of the year? And you always have that every time you go into a award season. You always know what the front runner is going into a film. So it's very hard to live up to those kind of expectations of am I watching the very best film of the year all the time? But this is one where you put your hands up and say, okay, fair enough. It's one of those. It's not my personal favorite of the nominees from this year, but it's
What's
one of those
your
ones where like, yeah, that's fair.
what's
That's
your
fair.
personal favorite? Which?
Promising Young Woman.
Oh yeah.
And the reason I prefer that is just because of literally just the narrative structure. I think it does really inventive things with the narrative and makes it way more entertaining than a film like this. Though obviously I feel like this is definitely the best directed film of the year by a mile. I'd also put The Father above Nomadland as well. Again for the similar reasons where it did stuff with the narrative that I'd genuinely never seen before and blew my socks off with it. But this film, it's not going to be a film that's going to blow your socks off. I don't think that's the
No,
point. But it's one where you see like this is very, very impressively made.
Speaking of, I did keep waiting for the penny to drop and for like something like dramatic or cinematic to happen,
Yeah,
and that tension does keep you going for a lot of the film. But
yeah,
eventually, you just sort of learn to go along with it.
yep,
We're still in non-spoilers, so if there's anyone
yeah,
still listening, I hope that's not a spoiler to say that that doesn't happen. I guess it sort of is, but I don't think it would ruin the
yeah.
experience.
We'll get onto that in a sec. While we're still talking about award stuff, I just want to say about this film was notable for being just the second film ever directed by a woman to win Best Picture, and I
Hurt
think it's good
Locker,
to
right?
see. Hurt Locker was the first one, yeah. This first from a woman of color. which is very important in terms of representation. And what I want to say with this is, like, I was talking about it on the show I did last week, react to the Oscars, and it's sort of like when you talk about representation, especially in terms of awards, it isn't necessarily about giving awards to people that are of ethnic minorities, or I'll give him that trophy because he's a certain race or whatever. It's about equal opportunity more than anything else. I want to live in a world where any film can win Best Picture. I didn't like it back in the day where you felt like this film couldn't win Best Picture because of its portrayal of a certain race, or because it portrays LGBTQ narratives, or this film's in a foreign language so it can't win. I feel like after Green Book won Best Picture, there was this feeling where the way that we perceive Best Picture winners was going to change because it beat Roma as well. And thinking, oh, Roma didn't win because it has subtitles in its foreign language. I think it was one of those ones where it was like, I guess you could say it was one where something like a bad thing has to happen in terms of it not happening again. And this was also the case when the Oscars So White thing happened, where we didn't have any actors of color nominated in any of the main categories. And even though there were performances from like Chadwick Boseman or Idris Elba that should have been nominated over those years, but the reaction to that was the following year. After the second year of Oscars So White, Moonlight won Best Picture. Barry Jenkins won Best Writing. Mahershala Ali became the first Muslim to win an acting Oscar. And I think with this, in terms of the last two winners of Best Picture being Parasite and now Nomadland, it sort of really opened the door for the way that Best Picture winners can happen. In terms of we've had now a film fully in Korean win Best Picture, and now a film directed by a woman of color portraying I think it's very rare, actually. I think felt in recent years where it's been filmed with a female lead winning Best Picture as well. The Shape of Water was the only notable example in the last 15 years of that happening.
2018.
Yeah. Oh, 2017.
It came out in 2017, was 2018.
We've
the
had
ceremony
this,
for 2017,
we've
yeah.
had this debate before.
just trying to clear it up.
Yeah.
The ceremony for 2017.
Because before that, you have to go back to $1 Million Baby in 2004.
Oh, wow.
I know, exactly. The rest have just been all male leads.
So it does mark a good change then. It's going in the right direction.
It's a film that I was always happy that was going to win Best Picture because of I feel like it's a really important win. And it's also one of those ones where if people ask me about why I fly the flag for the Oscars and stuff, why I think they're so important, it's because of films like this. Have you seen Songs My Brothers Taught Me or The Rider? That's the question I want to ask you.
No, the other Chloe Zhao films.
Yeah,
no, I haven't.
Exactly. This is my point. You didn't see those films because they weren't awards contenders. They weren't talked about past their release date. A film like this is being seen widely and was brought by Disney Plus to be streaming in this country because there's an audience for it that's come from the fact that it's had awards attention. So I feel like that is so important. Awards fly the flag for different types of films, the best films of the year, films that you wouldn't normally watch. I feel like it's massively important. So that's what I'd say on that matter. I think we'll leave it there for the normal review before, and we'll go and talk about spoilers now. If you have not seen the film, please do go and watch it. You can watch it now on Disney Plus Star. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you've listened to this point, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the places you find podcasts, also on YouTube as well. Find us on Twitter at bestpicture_pod, and we'll hope to see you for another episode sometime soon. But if you have seen the film and you want to hear our discussion on spoilers, we're going to talk about it right now.
It's fascinating. This trying to pick apart mentally, thinking back on the film, what's fiction and what's not.
Yep.
Some of it is a lot easier than others because I think of like Swanky. and
Yes.
Swanky was given 6 months to live when the cancer spread to her brain.
Mm.
Uh, and then by the end of the film, she's passed away.
Yeah.
But of course, the actress, the actual Swanky, a real person who was interviewed and starred in the film, is alive, I believe.
Yeah.
So that it creates
Well,
this.
but to be fair, I just read this film as a narrative film. I didn't really consider it to be non-fiction at any point.
But then you get to like Bob Wells, and was his story about his son? Bob Wells is a real guru who does
Yeah,
travel
I think
around.
that is
Was
true.
his exactly stuff like that that kind of blurs the line?
Yeah,
And it's like I know what you mean when you said, "Oh no, it's not a docudrama," because it is a fictional story. But
yeah,
that's not what I meant when I think he's trying to set the tone in the same way a docudrama would, trying to represent what it's like. It's very grounded. It's very through the
yeah,
perspective of someone actually living out there. It does really feel like if you were to say at the end this is based on a true story, I wouldn't be like, oh well, that's ridiculous.
yeah,
Like something like The Conjuring,
yeah,
based on a true stuff like that. You could see how this absolutely could be applied to real people. But do you think it's a bad idea to kind of mix fiction and fact like that, giving
yeah.
someone a tragic backstory that they didn't have
Sort
when they're
of.
a real person?
The scene that I was alluding to earlier in the episode is the one right near the end where she's talking to. I think she's talking to Bob Wells,
Yeah,
and he's explaining about his son. And this is really the first time Fern opens up about the loss of her husband as well at the same time. And what I found out was that Bob thought that Frances McDormand has actually gone through that. She didn't know that he didn't know that she was an actress. She thought, oh, this is something that's actually happening. And I feel really sorry for you about your loss of your husband and stuff like that. Oh no, my husband's still alive. My husband's Joel Cohen. so it's sort of like to that extent where it's like,
you think it's a bit manipulative?
it could be perceived as such, but then again, you get more effective drama from that. So,
I mean,
um,
should that be the end goal? Though? I mean, just that's the thing. Like there are people who say no matter what, the ends of art justifies the means, but I would disagree
yeah,
because
but that scene, it,
you don't have to attribute that
yeah,
that massive value to all art. Like it's
yeah,
all relative. Like you don't have to say you can do whatever you want as long as the art pays off. As that you can like suffering can lead
mm,
to art, stuff like that. I mean, it's just ridiculous because no,
yeah.
it doesn't have to. You can. There are different ways of doing it. There are more controlled ways of like getting that emotion, like putting that story to screen.
But that
So
scene is so effective in terms of I don't think that's something that's talked about enough. Its portrayal of grief is very impressive, and there's been a few films this year that have dealt with that in different ways. I feel like it's a very timely kind of thing to have, and it's important for people to hear, especially because it relates to suicide as well. I feel like that's an important thing to have represented in a film like this. Another point I was going to talk to you about, which was that we had to sort of skirt over earlier, was the portrayal of the relationship between Fern and Dave. I think there's no decision that's pleased me more in a film than Fern's decision to not live that life with Dave.
yeah,
It's
I know.
it's
Go on,
very he
so
had some really sort of creepy vibes about that family, and you can tell that it just wasn't for her. I really like the scene where she's staying in the guest house sort of thing, and she goes in the middle of the night over to sleep in her van instead. I feel like that's a really good scene because I feel like it's in a way representative of what you prioritize in life, isn't it? It's about having an identity, how important home is to you, and you can't suddenly just give that up, give it all away. It's sort of like the thing it reminded me of was there's a film a couple of years ago, which is absolutely brilliant. I recommend anyone checking out Lynn Shelton's film Outside In, which looks at a character returning home after spending 7 years in prison, and that film is about adapting to life back as you were, sort of thing, and how strange it is to be in that sort of different environment. And I feel like that's what it does in the same way here, is this portrayal of how can you go back to living a so-called normal life, in a family, together with a family in a house, in a so-called safe place. Well, sometimes you can't really go back. The whole point is you can't really go back and start over, and that's also true in terms of why the relationship didn't work out. I don't think the Dave character is a bad guy, or they would
No,
be
no.
a bad match together. But it's sort of like a case where, after going um, through the death of a partner, it's very difficult to recover from that. And it's also something like you don't have to always have, you know, a man with you all the time, sort of
Yeah,
thing,
that
in
would
order to
be the very typical
live your life.
Hollywood representation of that relationship. And I know what you
Yeah.
mean when you say the family's kind of creepy.
Mm.
It's like they're not. The film doesn't portray them as bad people.
No, I
It's
don't think
just
they're bad
trying
people
to
at all.
make it clear that she doesn't fit in there.
Yeah.
And like a typical structured script would try and force her into being like happy there.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very, very bold choice, as you say, and the correct choice just to be like, well, no, she just doesn't fit there, so she's not going to force herself
I
to
mean,
stay there. She's just going to like get on with what she was doing.
for the film itself, the I feel like the central theme of it is the sense of belonging, the sense of community, and you get that more of an impression in terms of Fern, in terms of the way that she feels belonging to the Nomad community more than anyone else.
I think it's interesting that they decided to have a character who, as the main character, who has so many options to get out of that situation, where
Yeah.
most people living like that probably don't. I
Mm.
mean, they might have family back home that they don't talk to, but for the most part, they're on the road because they have to be. So we have
Yeah.
this character who is giving three, I think, chances, three offers to go and live with people,
Yeah.
and she turns it down each time because it's just not what.
Yeah. She sometimes uses them for money, but that's about it.
I mean, I think the first one was the tutor job. The second one
Yeah.
was a sister, and the third one was Dave and his family.
Mm.
It's interesting that Dave is now out of that lifestyle.
Yeah,
So someone
yeah,
who
that's the
seemed
thing. It was sort of like you get that sort of interpretation that it was a bit of a backstab towards the ideals they had, as like he's not really a member of the community at all. If you're so quick to give it off like that sort of thing.
I mean, I don't think the film's trying to encourage people to live like that if they don't have to. I think it's just saying that Dave, to us when we first met him, he seems so comfortable and he knows what he's doing. He's got the whole setup. Like he must be someone who's going to be out here for the rest of his life.
Yeah,
And then you find out it's not like an actual betrayal. It's more of like a twist that
mm,
you wonder if he's going to be like arguing with his son or if they fell out massively. But
yeah,
it turns out he's scared to go back to that life because he doesn't know if he can do it.
yeah,
And like Fern is quite rightly just like that's forget all of that, just go and do it.
yeah.
Because like you don't have any actual reason to be out here anymore. And it's
Mm.
kind of a slap in the face to
You're not
everyone
running.
else.
You're not running away from anything.
You're just running away. You're just
You're
not.
running away from your future rather than running away from your past.
Yeah, exactly. That's a brilliant way of putting it. Avoiding that responsibility. And then she's just. I think it is like. Honestly, it would be more of a betrayal for him to stay
Yes.
and like try and integrate himself with these people who have very little choice but to be out there.
Yeah,
If he's just
very
someone,
vulnerable people that are dealing with very difficult things. We've seen with Swanky, incredibly bad illnesses and mental health issues and stuff like that. Well, if you don't have to live it like that,
and
then
do you think it's like
you
somewhat like a hero complex for him to be like, oh, well, you don't have to live out here anymore because we've got a guest house for you, and look, I'm gonna rescue you from this
yeah,
lifestyle. It's in that very Hollywood sense, but
yeah,
it's just not that kind of film.
it's not the kind of film. Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
that's
that's very
exactly. Yeah,
fascinating. I
that's the
really,
point. Yeah,
So like, what do you think's next for Fern's character? Do you think she's ever maybe going to go live back with the sister, or do you think she's going to be out there rest of her life? Like, where do you think it's a very open end?
Yeah,
Where do you think we're supposed to believe that the Fern character goes next?
I think you just see it down the road, don't you?
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. I know it's cliche, but it's sort of like I think that's sort of the point, isn't it?
It was. I think we were introduced to that towards the end of the film. I think we heard the expression before, but it is just at the end of the film when when Bob Wells is explaining that philosophy. I
Yeah,
think that is a way of kind of setting the audience on its way after the film ends. Because I was back into it at that point. It
yeah,
was around the time of like Dave and his
yeah,
family and stuff that I was starting to like switch off a bit.
yeah, because it's a completely different portrayal of this sort of life that you're doing. This is what I was coming back to with this idea of sitting in with the film. You've got to be on the move all the time in order to stick with it.
Yeah,
Sort of thing. And I feel like that's the case a lot with road movies itself as a genre. You've got to keep on moving on, sort of thing, in order to go from one thing to the next. And once you sort of like you hit a stop point, well, you're sort of like, okay, we're not on the move anymore. There's no shots of the sunset. There's no sort of like beautiful scenes where she's in rivers and looking at mountain ranges and stuff like that. You're sort of like you're back where you are in sort of like a normal film, or to a certain extent, where you're with like a family and you're in the house and everything like that, and you're sort of like, oh, hold up, this is a different film that I was. This is a different world to the one that I was living in. And
yeah,
that's why it's important that she gets back out there, so you feel like you're back connected to that world that is presented in the film.
yeah. I mean, do you agree with what the sister said that you just like you part of it is you just wanting to go and meet all these people and you're more fascinated by them?
Um,
Because I thought the sister was kind of missing the point, but
yeah,
it's
I
not
don't think that's
completely.
true at all.
It's more of a. It's more felt more like she was saying that to the audience.
Yeah.
Like you're just
Well,
you
it's
don't.
devil's advocate, isn't it?
Yeah,
That when you're writing a script, it's always about including a sort of conflict, and when
yeah,
you don't have like an actual villain or anything getting in the way of stuff, you need to sort of have a devil's advocate voice in response to how different people perceive that central character.
yeah, definitely. Is there
Any
any
final
other?
thoughts?
I was going to ask you if there's any like plot points we missed out on.
Not really. I think what it just does a great job of doing is portraying this kind of lifestyle and community and location, stuff like that. It does it in a brilliant way and a very unique way, and I feel like it's a very important film for a lot of people to watch.
Uses a lot of like repeating imagery to ground the characters. Like rocks come up quite a lot,
Yeah,
like
establishing
decorated and
establishing
sculpted
shots on
rocks.
there.
There's no like the little ones that the characters make. Piano comes up a few times.
Yeah,
I didn't know what that was about. We
no,
keep seeing. I think that was just a way of like. I don't know if it's something we never actually learned if Fern can play piano, but she watches people play a couple of times.
yeah,
I don't know if there was something to that about. As I was watching, I was thinking, am I just overanalyzing this? Because is there something to that about not being able to express what she's actually thinking? I don't know. But my final thoughts of the film are very well deserved win.
yeah. Definitely, I thought the same way. Even before it won, it's sort of like it's one of those ones where you put your hands up and say, "Yeah, that's a really good representative of the year." And I'm glad that it won, and I hope as many people will check it out as possible. And now it's available on streaming in this country. You should be able to now. Well, you should have already seen it by now if you listen to this part of the podcast. And yeah, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And we'll be back with some more sometime again soon. As you know, available on all the podcast streaming stations. Make sure to follow us on there so you don't miss an episode in the future. You can leave a review on Apple Podcast if you listen on there. It would help me out massively. Subscribe on YouTube, follow on Twitter, bestpicture_pod, and we'll see you for another episode sometime again soon. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.